Hello, everybody, and welcome to Feature Friday number 2. I had my doubts at one point during the week whether this would actually be a thing because I had been busy and, busy with other things that aren't Marble Blast, as if, I know some of you are thinking, wait, there are other things in life than Marble Blast? It turns out, yes, there are. Regardless, so yeah. So what I've been focusing on over the past week is physics. And so if you take a look, let's open up Quaternion and see. So this is Quaternion. I have the music disabled because it would be annoying. Um, and let's open up this level again and see what it looks like now.
Ready, set, go!
Okay, so the first thing you'll notice is that I seem to have fallen through the floor. This is because, this is because of the fact that and I'm rolling in the air. So this is actually bullet physics that you're seeing right here. This is not the built-in physics, as evidenced by the fact that the stuff I can collide with appears to not at all correspond to the stuff I can see. That will be fixed in later weeks, in hopefully this next coming week. So, yes, I also, if you can hear my keyboard, I cannot jump at the moment. I'm hitting my jump key and nothing's happening. That's because jumping is a bit more complicated. You actually have to figure out whether you're touching a wall or a floor, and if so, what angle it's at, and all of that fun stuff. So for the moment, no jumping, just rolling. But the rolling works pretty well. There is also air movement. It's a bit tougher to demonstrate because I'm mostly in the air. And you'll notice
Ready,
it also
set,
constrain us
go!
before it says go. Now you actually can't really roll that much on the start pad or lack thereof until it says go, and the reason for that is that you kind of are still slipping on the ground, like there's still friction there, and that's different from the that's that's different from the way that did I drop several frames there? No, it looks like I'm fine. It just took a while to send. Well, anyway, you can't really roll off the start. You don't really slide as easily because it does that differently. I think in the original Marble Blast physics, it actually disables friction while you're on the start pad, just so that you can get a good rolling start. But seeing as I have no idea what the spawn sequence is even going to look like in Quaternion yet, I didn't really bother implementing that. It could be implemented very easily. It'd be like 2 more lines in the script. But yeah. This platform is also tilted at a slight angle. Uh, this was mainly so that before I had controls implemented, I could make sure that you were actually rolling. And that was tricky to do because the set transform function on the Marble doesn't actually set rotation. I had to hack the engine and modify that function so that it sets your rotation as well as your position. Because for whatever reason, it doesn't do that already. So yeah. Um, some other things you'll notice, there's no sound yet. That's going to be a bit more complex to set up, but not terrible. I already have the pitch shifting functionality in place. I just have to link it to your rolling speed. I think I will actually have to add a function then to get your rolling speed, and by rolling speed, I of course mean angular velocity. So yeah. So some other stuff. Um, if you yeah, this platform I'm on doesn't go on forever. You can roll off. Gravity is default marble. There we go. Gravity is default Marble Blast gravity. You can kind of tell from here that there's air movement. I don't know. It's a bit hard to tell. And now we're basically just in free fall. There's no bounce trigger. Oh, yeah, this is another thing that doesn't happen in Marble Blast. You slow down in the air. Your rotation speed slows down. I might decrease that, but that happens for a reason. And that reason is, for whatever reason, rolling friction doesn't really seem to work like you'd expect it to. This is what happened to me in Simulacrum. Yeah, most of the physics values I used for this were just straight up copied from Simulacrum because I spent some time tweaking that to be good, and it's the same physics engine, so why not just use the same values? But yeah, so I actually just have angular damping just constantly being applied to this marble. But like I said, though, I might decrease that. If I didn't do it at all currently, what would happen is you would start rolling and you would never stop. Like there'd be no like braking or anything. Oh, that is an interesting little glitch. At this point, I'm falling so quickly that with the lag, you can see I'm actually sort of jittering a little bit in the air. I'm not going to bother trying to fix that because number one, it's rare that you'll be falling this quickly in the game anyway, and number two, it actually kind of mirrors what you'd expect to see if you were falling that quickly, with all the air friction and such. Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you look really closely, the marble is jumping up and down slightly on the screen. You know the really interesting thing about that? I didn't even realize that was possible. Like, I didn't realize it was possible for the marble to physically change where it appears to be on the screen relative to the camera. Oh, it's steadily getting worse. That's fun.
Ready,
So, yeah.
set,
You see I have all the mechanisms in
go!
place to reset. It'll also reset if you restart the level, though I think in the process, and this is a glitch, I think in the process it actually does create another copy of the platform we're on. Which, because it's just a static body, it doesn't really affect anything, but it would definitely look weird. Not look weird. It's just, it doesn't even look weird. It's just inefficient. That's all it is. It's just inefficient. But that's just because I have the test platform there. So you'll notice there are two copies of the Learning to Roll platform. That's not normal. And if I can try to get the camera to go through one of these, like the lower platform. Okay, so the camera doesn't go through either copy normally, but if I roll into this one, you'll notice that it actually has an inside. Like it has faces on the inside, and ordinarily it wouldn't do it. And that's because this is not a diff file, this upper one. This is a DTS. So with some help from Matt P, thank you Matt, and from whoever actually coded the utilities that Matt P sent me, which I think a couple of them were modified from just straight up TGE and straight up TGE utilities. So thanks to those, I actually have a way to convert diff files to DTS files. Now the DTS files come out looking a bit weird slash bad. What I mean by that is that I mean, it looks fine in game. If you look at the file in Blender or in some other modeling program, let me actually demonstrate that. This is actually pretty interesting because it tells you something about the way it tells you something about the way that diff map to diff works. About how completely crazy and magic map to diff is. Oh wow, it opened to. Oh yeah, right, because I saved the preferences. That's funny. Okay, so that's a convenient coincidence. So here it is. So you'd expect it to look at least something like what it would look like in Constructor. You've got like one brush here, one brush there. Well, yeah, no. If we take a look at the wireframe, this is how it's getting split up. It's uh, it's getting split up like this into a lot of really weird triangles that kind of crisscross the shape. And this is something I'd want to try to shy away from in Quaternion. The reason for this being that, as it turns out, there's a glitch in bullet physics where sometimes collisions can get detected in a weird way, and how that would manifest itself in the game is you'd be able to like bump across surfaces, like they'd feel bumpy even if they're not supposed to be, and I think it might affect jumping as well, like you jump to the side or something. And from what I've heard, there's a fix of some sort. Um, but it like generally the problem gets worse the thinner your triangles get, and some of these triangles are really thin and long. So that's what I wouldn't want to. That's what I want to avoid. Um, okay, so I've been informed by Matt that apparently he made diff to DAE, the tool to convert diffs to collada, from the Torque 3D source code and not the TGE source code. That actually surprises me that Torque 3D could even be made to support diff files from old versions like that. But yeah, whatever. Um, I would guess that it's the diff file that has all the weird triangles like this. Um, Although, it might be this specific diff, come to think of it. Because I think I also remember Hi Guy showing me his diff viewer, and the triangles seemed okay in that. I don't know, Hi Guy can comment on that. In any case, so there are three tools that got used to convert this to a DTS. Number one is diff to DAE, as I mentioned before. Number two is actually this DAE fixing tool. Let's see if I can find that really quickly. If I go to, let's see, that'll be in personal, creations, games. Yeah, DAE fix. And this is something I actually coded myself. Just for this purpose. If it's a utility that takes in a DAE file and fixes it. And what I mean by fixes it is that diff to DAE does some weird things in the DAE file that means that most importers won't actually recognize it. And it fixes those. It's really simple, just a couple of regex replaces. But yeah. And then the textures are automatically working. So okay, there we go. So yeah. And then you just export to DTS using the Blender DTS exporter, which is somewhere floating around. Um, yeah, question for MB staff, by the way. Could we possibly have a download of the of regular map to diff and of the DTS exporter on the site downloads, because those are both really useful tools for developers, and I don't think either of them is currently on there. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. So yes. So going back into the game, the reason I'm using DTS files again is because DTS files, well, not DTS files, but the whole point is actually to be able to get DAE files, because look how nice DAE files are. If I open a DAE file, it's XML formatted. So first of all, it's human readable. Secondly, if you take a look at this, these are just straight up coordinates. So this is normals and this is UVs, and we don't really care about either of those. But the important thing is this here, these are positions. And so the positions of the vertices obviously are useful because we could use these to just grab the triangles and import them into Bullet. And if I want to be really lazy about it, I might actually just straight up use a library that somebody's made for that very purpose. So the whole outcome of this, the whole point of it, the goal will be to take this shape that you can see and actually load it into the physics world so that you actually collide with it, and I don't have to add this test cube. Yeah, it's actually an entire cube. And you can tell this because, like, if you go off to this side, you'll notice something. So I fall, and then I start actually kind of rolling because I'm hitting the edge of it.
Ready,
So,
set,
yes.
go!
So, goals for next week will be that, and jumping and sound effects for the marble. And I think that's a fair, decent amount of goals for the next week. Um, Also, thank you all so much for your help in me thinking through the whole story idea. Yeah, I've decided that having a story is kind of dumb, at least for the moment. Hopefully the game is well designed enough that you won't need a story for that, sort of guiding motivation. Also, where am I using MBS textures? I legitimately don't know what you're referring to. And I feel like we should get this resolved because it was, yeah, I don't want yet another mod to be tied into that controversy. In Constructor, I didn't have Constructor open. I'm sorry, but I still don't get what you mean. Oh, ha ha ha. Well, apparently Matt thought I was using MBS textures because he was looking at Razi's screen instead of mine. Yeah, no, I'm not using any resources from other mods at this point. Apart from the fact that I'm using code from MBPU, which which I don't necessarily need to give credit for because it's mainly me. I'm also at this point using some code that was also used in MBP for engine hacks and such, MBP and PQ, and so I'll be sure to credit the Platinum team for that. But yeah, I don't think I'm actually using anything from MBS at the moment. I will actually be using some of Matt's code later on, though. Spoiler alert. So, at this point, I'd like to open up the forum, not forum, but the stream for any questions. Um, I'm also probably going to switch to MBPU because it's a lot less boring than rolling around on a slanted plane. Yeah, Matt knows what MBS feature I'm planning on using. It's actually not just an MBS feature; it's one of the ones that they ripped off from PQ. But hey, you know, I'll definitely be sure to be original with it. That is to say, do things that aren't necessarily in MBS or PQ with it. I'll let you wonder what those things are. So, if anybody has any questions, feel free by all means to ask away. Yes, yes, to clarify, the feature in question was remade for MBS, completely recoded. They weren't stealing code. And if anybody is legitimately worried that the code is stolen, I could theoretically just recode the entire thing. In fact, come to think of it, based on the fact that MB or not MB, based on the fact that Quaternion is so different from Marble Blast, I might end up just recoding the whole thing anyway, just because, you know. Or not. Well, I'll see when I get there. Why am I so dumb? I don't know exactly what you're referring to. I do have really stupid thoughts sometimes, though. Like, a fun story. I'm riding the bus the other day, and I see the bus driver is wearing sunglasses. And I'm looking at the bus driver wearing sunglasses, and for a split second I think, yeah, it looks kind of like, Ray Charles or something. I wonder if he's blind. And then I almost instantly realized, wait, if he's driving a bus, then yeah. Um, am I in the chat? Yes, you are. That's apparently somebody named Anthony. I don't know if it's the Anthony I know. I think it is, based on the fact that it was Rozzy who replied. Any other questions regarding Quaternion development and design in general? Uh, yes, it is the Anthony I was thinking of. Okay. Oh gosh. Yeah, I don't even get me started on MBU PC. That's an even more controversial project. I guess I should give my thoughts on this whole controversy. It's topical. It's Kairos. So my opinion on the whole thing is just, I've heard different things from different people as far as what they've copied, whom they've copied from, etc. Personally, I think the most likely story at this point is that they didn't necessarily copy anything directly, but rather ripped it off so heavily by making stuff almost exactly like it. So it definitely falls into a gray area as far as intellectual property is concerned. Uh, but that being said, I would rather the super team tried to be more original just because not for, controversial reasons or anything, just because that makes a better game. Um, but yeah. As far as MBUPC is concerned, let me just say this. From what I've seen, yeah, it's technically illegal, but it's kind of freaking awesome. Like I wish we could get a sort of passive sanction like we did with MBG. Um, oh, Anthony, ask Matt. I think I gave him the DAE fixer. Anyway, anyway, so I wish we had the sort of passive sanction of, asking them, hey, you guys mind if we release this and not hearing back or whatever actually happened with MBG. The reason being that MBU's engine is a lot like MBG's, except slightly more advanced, and by slightly I mean the graphics are way better. Oh, apparently Matt doesn't have the DAE fixer. I'll make sure to give that to those guys. Anyway, so as I was saying, um, there'd be a lot of amazing modding potential there if we could just modify MBU and not feel slightly dirty about it. Most of the stuff that we would get out of it has been implemented in MBG's engine by now. What with shader support is being actively worked on, and marble physics, that's been done. Multiplayer's been done, but it's hard to do it well, especially since the engine is just that much more dated. But that's just my 2 cents. Next question. Will Coup be more like a traditional MB game now that the storyline is scrapped? A bit more, I guess, just by virtue of the fact that that's an inherent property of scrapping the storyline. Um, but not terribly much. I'm still planning on having a sort of hub level structure. I'm still planning on keeping the sort of tree of level unlocking, which I'm not actually sure if I've mentioned this. Have I mentioned the fact the way you'll unlock levels in Quaternion? Because it's fairly different from MBG. Huh. I'm honestly looking for an answer here, guys. So remind me whether I've done this. If not, I can open up I can open up Paint or something and diagram it. Tell us. All right, so this is actually a really interesting concept, and it's something I've put some thought into. I am actually partly basing this idea off of something I saw in a something I saw on this one post somewhere on the website about, or somewhere on the website. No, just somewhere on the web. I forget exactly what site it was. Okay, that's working. About ooh, I can actually. Why can't I? It's not. What? How come my touchscreen isn't working for this? Like, can I? Why isn't my touchscreen working? It should be. That's strange. Like, what if I have this open? Can I no? What if I no? My touchscreen isn't working. But yeah, let's see. So it was actually based off of a website I saw about about Zelda dungeons and some of the design that would go into making dungeons that play well in Zelda games. Apparently, we dropped a few frames there, so if that didn't get across, let me know. No, that's not it. No, no, I don't want quiz up. Uh, maybe it's in here. Let's see, PC and devices. Uh, display? No. Mouse? No. Well, okay. Regardless, so so um, so there's a concept in mathematics called a Hasse diagram, and I know I'm getting fairly technical here. When I name a German guy that you've never heard of, you know that it's getting pretty serious. But in any case, basically how it works is, man, I can I enable the. Basically how it works is you have. Oh, here we go. Pen and touch. Why is it not working at all? That's weird. Yeah. My touch screen just isn't a touch screen right now. I don't get why that's happening. Oh, I just somehow minimized everything. That's nice. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties, but maybe I have to make my main display. No, that's I don't know. I'll just have to go without it. I'm sorry about that happening, but okay. So, so a Hasse diagram works as follows. Um, you have points, and these represent things. They could be levels, they could be courses, etc. And a Hasse diagram is used to indicate a partial order between these things. So a partial order means that some things are ordered, but some of them might not be. So like if we label these, we have A, B, C, and D here. Now, what this is indicating is that A comes before B in our ordering, and B comes before D, and A comes before C, and C comes before D. But B and C don't necessarily have any inherent relationship between the two of them. They could come in either order. So there are two possible orders that would satisfy this diagram. We have A, B, C, D, or we could do A, C, B, D. And so a really natural way to think about this is in terms of prerequisites. If these are tasks that one has to complete, what this diagram is telling us is that you have to complete A before you can do B or C, and you have to complete both B and C before doing D. But B and C can be done independently of each other. So, basically, we can use this to model how progression works in games. Now, some of the most basic models of game progression are as follows. We could have a very linear game where we have each level must be completed before the next level. And this is something like some of the old games like, Super Mario Brothers. First you have to complete level 1-1, and then level 1-2, and then level 1-3, and then level 1-4, and then level 2-1, and so on going up the line. Now, it's a bit different in Super Mario Brothers in that you actually have the functionality to skip levels, which can't really be gotten across in this diagram. But ignoring that, that's essentially how a very linear game would work. On the other hand, you could have an incredibly nonlinear game where you just have like maybe you have 5 levels A, B, C, D, and E. Or, let's just make it 4 because reasons. Let's make it A, B, C, and D. And you can complete those in any order, and then you win. Now, this is a bit unrealistic because at that point, why even bother making them part of the same game? They're kind of just separate games or what have you. So typically, maybe we have those 4 levels, but we also have like one other level that you need in order to, beat any of the others. Maybe that's sort of your tutorial. And then you have sort of a final boss that combines all of these. And so if this is an example of this sort of game is the game VVVVVV, or V if you've ever seen it. Wonderful indie game, would recommend. And so this is the structure of that game. You have Space Station 1 here, and then you have the lab, the tower, Space Station 2, the warp zone, and then up here you have the final level. Now, obviously there's a huge contrast between these two structures. And both of them can work, both of them can make a good game. But both extremes kind of have their own disadvantages. The disadvantage of having a very linear structure like this is that you need to be very careful in keeping difficulty at an appropriate progression. Because if a player comes up to a level that they find is too hard, like, let's say maybe, ooh, this castle here, it's really hard, I don't even know what I'm doing. Well, tough. Because that's the only thing I can do in order to advance. I can't, like, go off and play some other level unless I happen to find the warp zone, and then I'll probably be even more more lost. I'm not going to be able to advance because I don't have any alternatives. So that's the danger that you can run into there, is that if your difficulty curve isn't perfect, if it goes too steep at just one point, you can frustrate a player to the point of quitting the game. The eponymous rage quit, as it were. Eponymous was the wrong word to use. Whatever. This structure over here also has a disadvantage, and that is in this. Now, what V does in these 4 levels is it gives them each a different gameplay mechanic. In this level, you have the inversion planes. In this level, you have the scrolling mechanic. In this level, you have conveyor belts, and in this level, you have screen wrapping. And those are all new mechanics in their respective levels. They expand on the basic gameplay mechanics that you learned in Space Station 1. And then, of course, the final level combines them all. And this works because in every level you're learning a new skill that isn't dependent on the skills you learned in these others. But it can be tricky to pull that off. You can run into problems. And some of that would include the fact that because some of the skills we've learned in Space Station 1 are going to be used in all of these, as you beat some of these levels, you're going to be practicing the skill. So no matter what order you beat these in, they'll eventually, apart from these mechanics, like the basic, running and jumping of it, will get easier because you're getting more used to it. And as far as that mechanic's concerned, these all have to have roughly the same difficulty. Otherwise, one of them would be too hard just coming out of Space Station 1. So the tricky thing for having a really non-linear structure like this is that all of your making sure that all of your levels are independent enough in the skill set required that the first one doesn't seem really hard at first and the last one doesn't seem really, really easy just because those skills you've been practicing. But at the same time, you can't just have completely independent skills because then, every level it's like an entirely different game. You have to have some features that unify all of the levels or else your game just feels really disconnected. So both of these are legitimate issues that one has to consider, and there are a number of ways you can deal with that. And I think both of these games handle that pretty well. Super Mario Brothers obviously is one of the best-selling games of all time. Um, it definitely gets around the difficulty curve issue by just having a really good difficulty curve. Like it's well designed, and that can be really difficult to pull off. V, on the other hand, makes sure to have these different independent concepts introduced in each level. In addition, it also has, sort of off the diagram here, intermissions that happen independently of these levels and sort of independently of this Hasa diagram structure after you've completed a certain number of levels, no matter which ones they were. So within those, you can build up a difficulty curve that's more linear, similar to the one present in Mario. So the approach I'm looking to use for Quaternion, if everybody's okay with me just erasing this diagram at the moment, is something of a ooh. So Anthony apparently is wondering if I'm going to have it be non-linear, but playing certain levels will alter the state of other levels. Not exactly. That is a very interesting way to go about it, and that is definitely something that I would love to explore at some point, but it's not what I have planned for Quaternion. What I have planned for Quaternion is something more along these lines, to try to combine these styles into sort of a tiered structure. So you have your starting point in the game, and this maybe branches out into a few levels. And then there's a second tier of levels on top of these. Now, what we could do is mandate, oh, you have to complete all of these levels before moving on to any of these. But that would be kind of restrictive. The issue you run into there is, what if I find this level really hard? So I finished these two levels, but I'm still stuck on this one. Well, I can't advance anywhere in the game anymore until I finish this one. So my goal is to try not to have bottlenecks like that, where you absolutely have to finish a level before advancing. I mean, towards the end of the game, that's obviously inevitable, because you can't just keep having more alternative levels. But but at the same time, I don't want it to be so open-ended that you're not really gaining skill. So the idea is to maybe interleave these a bit. So if I do something like this, and this probably isn't the exact structure that the game is going to have. It's going to depend. So maybe I have something like this, and then this one has another one over here that's also that, and then these two make that, and then this is your final level up here. So you see in this structure, whenever you want to unlock a new level, there's something else you have to do first, but, and often there are multiple levels that you have to complete first, but there's alternatives. So like, let's say I beat this level, and I beat this level. Okay, well now this level's unlocked, but I don't want to go about that one just yet. It's kind of like a level up. So I'm going to beat this level, and now this level's also unlocked. Maybe I'll beat that one. Um, Now this level, let's say this level is really hard for me. I don't know why. It should be one of the easier levels, but for me it's just really hard. I can still beat this level and beat this much of the game without having completed this level yet. So you see here, I've got these two levels that I've completed on sort of this tier, but I've already beaten two levels in the next tier, and hopefully in doing so, I've gained some more skill in sort of the basic mechanics of the game that I can then use to complete this level. And then when I do that, that automatically unlocks these two levels. Let's say I beat this one, but I hold off on this one at the moment. Well, at this point, I can also complete these two levels and advance still a fair chunk along the way in the game without having beaten this level. And then once I beat this level, I unlock this level, which unlocks this level, which unlocks the last level. And that's the great thing about the game, is even if you're stuck on a level, there are still, like, you know, sometimes even like 4 or 5 levels you can complete in the meantime while you're trying to, work on it. So you still get that sense of progression. Even if you can't beat this level, you still get a sense of progression in beating the other levels while you're practicing those skills that you're going to need in this level. Now, of course, the interesting thing is, why are the level prerequisites set up this way? Because you have to justify that somehow in the game in order for it to make any sense to the player. You can't just arbitrarily say, oh, you can't pop the balloons in the balloon popping level until you've ridden the train, even if those two aren't connected at all. But if you have one level that's popping balloons, and if you have another level that's riding a train, and then you have a level that those are both prerequisites for, that's popping balloons on a train, there's a very clear reason why those two levels are prerequisites. So, I apologize if I'm boring you with this description, but hopefully you guys find this a bit interesting. So maybe this is like, you learn skill A, you learn skill B here, and you learn skill C here. Well, this level then is a level that would require skills A and B. And this level here, maybe this is just a more advanced version of A, call it A prime, and this here is C prime. This level would require skills B and C. Well, this level here, you need to be able to do A prime and B, and then maybe this level you need A, B, and C prime. This level you need A, B, and C, but it also introduces concept D. And then you really need D along with, C prime in this level, and in this you've got A prime, C, D prime, and let's throw in B, just for kicks. And some of this I just had to assign arbitrarily, but basically that's that's part of the point of it, is you can be introducing concepts while at the same time reintroducing, and incorporating concepts that you already had in previous levels. And this gives you the ability to have the player be constantly learning new things, constantly getting accustomed to new features, while at the same time getting better at the things the player has already learned. And if anything, this is one of the downfalls of V, is let's say you go to, the, Space Station 2 right away and you learn how to use conveyors. Well, you're not going to see those conveyors again until the final level, and by then, have you forgotten how they work? Are you not as good at them? You haven't had that much practice? Or it just seems a bit weird to have them again out of the blue. Having this prevents that. This structure here, that's another advantage of having a more varied structure like this, is that it prevents that in that um, in that you're constantly getting concepts from previous levels used in more advanced levels. And again, you don't have to be this restrictive. Like currently, not counting different levels, you've just got 4 skills. Typically, a game is going to have more than 4 mechanics. So some of these might be multiple letters. Like this might be C1, C2, and C3, and maybe only some of these contribute to C prime, and you get the idea. And like maybe this is only a C2 here. It almost sounds like we're talking about vitamins at this point. But in any case, this is an oversimplification of how things might go. But this is my goal with Quaternion. Now, of course, the other thing is you have to justify it not only from a gameplay perspective, but from a story perspective. And by story perspective, I don't mean like an actual story. I mean within the universe of the game. Like, okay, so there are 2 trains, and the second train has you popping balloons on it. Well, why do you have to ride the first train before riding the second train? If it's just a matter of difficulty, that's fine. It might leave the player feeling a little bit disconnected from the game environment. But if you make up some reason for it, even if it's not a very good reason, well, I mean, hopefully it's a good reason. If you make up some reason for it, like, oh well, the first train is what gets you to the place where the second train leaves off, something like that, then it makes sense. Then you understand why you need to do the one level before you can move on to the next one. And that's where my whole concept of powering up a machine comes into play. Is if you have a machine, you have different systems that can depend on other systems. So maybe some of your low-level systems are, powering the machine and things like this, while some of the upper-level systems are a bit some of the upper level systems are things like, maybe one of these is like, if this is a computer, perhaps, like, one of these is your PSU down here, and then you need your RAM, and then somewhere up farther along, you've got, like, the driver for your video card, which is definitely still needed in order for your computer to be fully functional, but it's a bit more of an advanced thing. It depends on more of the other things, and your computer can still function on a minimal level without it. So the idea in Quaternion is that you're powering up some sort of giant artifice, some sort of giant machine, one chunk at a time, and the levels are these various systems in the machine. And getting each of them up and running allows you then to utilize other systems. Um, Here's a comment I'm getting in the chat that I want to address. What if Quaternion, well, he said Marble Blast Quaternion, and I do want to clarify, while I hate to be nitpicky, Quaternion is not meant to be a Marble Blast game. It's meant to be like a Marble Blast game, and it's based on the Marble Blast engine, certainly, but I'm not using the name Marble Blast with it. And I'm doing that for a very clear and, very important purpose. I don't want people to think of it as just another Marble Blast mod, or even as a Marble Blast mod. I want people to think of it as a game, a completely separate game that happens to be using the same system. Anyway, so his question is, what if Quaternion is one giant level split into a bunch of parts like Pangea is to Earth? I have actually considered this. A hypothetical system that you could use to unload one mission file and load another mission file while the level server is still running. Based on the fact that I'm using DAE files and DTS files, I don't think I would run into the 512 interior limit, so this is technically feasible. However, I don't know if it's really practical. In doing so, there are other games that have done this. One great example being, I think, one of the sort of, I don't know if they were one of the pioneers, but one of the first games I remember as having advertised this was Tony Hawk's American Wasteland. And the way that worked, it worked, but it seemed kind of artificial because you have, maybe one city or one part of the city over here and one part of the city over here. And in between the two, you'd basically have this tunnel. And it's this like weird tunnel, it's almost and it kind of has a warehousey feel to it. And you can skate around in it, there's some fun stuff. And then you've got this giant door here and this giant door here, and the first door closes and this level unloads, and then this level loads, and then once it's done, the second door opens. I could do this in Quaternion, but to be honest, I feel like it kind of detracts from it. Like, it's obvious that this is a loading screen. That's the thing. Regardless of whether it keeps you occupied. Um, And even if it wouldn't take that long to load, like because in general loading levels in Marble Blast is what, a few seconds, it would still cause an issue here because you still need to have this bottleneck. You need to have a place where you completely close this off from that part of the level so that you can't even see past it, because if you could see past it, you could see, oh look, that's not even loaded. And close that off from that part of that level, and based on the general look of Marble Blast levels, how you have, one platform floating in the air here and another platform floating in the air there, and that's definitely something I want to preserve in Quaternion, it would just be impractical because it wouldn't really make much sense. Now, I understand the level doesn't necessarily have to spatially make sense. They built an entire game off of the idea of not spatially making sense, that game being Antichamber, and it was a massive indie success. Was that an indie game? I kind of assumed. Uh, but and I think I might actually have something like that in maybe one of the levels in Quaternion, but it would be a bit weird to have it in all of them. So, as a result, I generally don't like this approach. Um, Instead, what I'll probably be doing is boring old teleports. You go into the teleport, you come out in another level. Um, Now, what I'm toying with the idea of now is having basically a grid, and this is a similar concept to V, but instead of actual spatial connections, it's more of a teleportation-based thing. So I have a grid, and there are coordinates in this grid, and from each space in the grid, you can maybe teleport to some of the adjacent spaces. So this here, you can teleport to these and back. And then maybe this one is kind of closed off from the rest. There's no teleport on these sides because this is one of your levels. But the rest of this is the hub. So you explore the hub, you try to find these dead ends that actually lead to levels. And so you could maybe have like a cool map of, okay, here's your teleportation grid, here's your grid of, mini universes, and this is the one you're in now, and that's the one you're trying to get to. Something along those lines. So kind of like, I guess, picture the world map in V if you were to combine it with the sort of world graph in Fez. It's a similar concept to that. And that would imply that the hub level isn't one hub level, that it's split up into a bunch of different levels. Um, Also, maybe, these aren't dead ends necessarily. We could have one level that leads directly into another level. It's just in between we have some of the hub components. So that would definitely be a cool idea. Kind of blur the line between what's a hub area and what's a level. Um, so this is definitely something I've been seriously toying with in my head, and I definitely like some feedback on it. Do you think this is a cool idea? So, at this point, I'll accept any more questions you guys have. I'm basically done explaining what I wanted to explain as far as the whole level design structure and, game theory and all that. I guess it's not really game theory so much, um, but yeah, at this point, I'll be accepting questions. I'm going to want to, let the stream off a bit, pretty soon because I have other things to get to tonight. But yeah. Uh, okay, Anthony thinks it's a cool idea. That's good. Always good to have positive feedback. Then again, my first feedback on the story idea I had was positive, and to be honest, I think that idea kind of sucked. But, you know, that's just a theory, a game theory. Oh, gosh. so, but I'm definitely interested if you guys have questions, mainly because I'm not sure exactly how well I explained all this. And questions are a great way to both simultaneously let me know how I explain things and allow me to go into more details. And also to, be creative because, somebody might ask me a question that I don't yet have an idea of how I'm going to answer it. And that's good because it calls it to my attention. In the meantime, I'll leave this diagram up in the background for now, but back to MBPU. Well, yeah, I definitely dislike the way Marble Blast Gold does this whole Hasa diagram idea. Essentially, Marble Blast Gold's diagram is just three long vertical lines, one for beginner, one for intermediate, one for advanced. And it's completely the opposite of how it should be, in my opinion, because like the intermediate levels don't really increase in difficulty that much as you go through them. I mean, yeah, I guess the earlier ones are a bit easier, but there isn't really that clear a progression. Like you don't need the skills from every previous intermediate level to do the next one. Not anything close to that. But you can theoretically start the game out playing Thrill Ride, and that just makes no sense because it would make sense for them to hide to deny access to intermediate and advanced until you've at least learned the game first. But yeah. And then you have games like Ultra where you can just skip ahead and play more levels. Um, I forget whether Ultra really has a level unlock system. If we remove the level unlock system, then our diagram basically just becomes a bunch of dots. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It means you're not restricting the player at all, which is great because they can, play whatever level they want, but you kind of get the issue as a result of that there isn't really any sort of clear progression in the game. I mean, in games like Marvel Blast Ultra, there's at least a sort of hazily defined progression. Definitely still ask questions, by the way. Don't pause because I'm saying something. There is sort of an informal one due to the fact that that the levels have a canonical ordering. But so that's a decent strategy to go about. But if you want to be a bit more restrictive and a bit more like an actual sort of game, it's definitely not the way to go. Um, Mobile, if I recall, actually did have unlocks where you needed to beat a certain portion of the previous levels in order to advance. And that's another approach that can work really well in games. Um, the disadvantage you could have with that is that you don't exactly have much room for just introducing completely new independent gameplay mechanics. Like, it doesn't quite work as naturally with that idea, but at the same time, it's actually a really great way to turn a strictly linear game, like, Super Mario Brothers style, into a game that's much more forgiving as far as not being able to complete one particular level where you can just skip it and come back later. Um, the Hasa diagram for that, by the way, if you're wondering, doesn't really exist because the idea of having completed a certain number of levels isn't really well defined in the context of partial orders. This is a very formal mathematical thing that I've introduced you guys to. And that's why I drew the intermissions off separately in V and didn't just put them into the diagram, because they're a bit different that way. But I guess you could come up with some sort of extended Hasa diagram that includes them, because, to some degree that's what math is all about. How could we extend this? Will you include a tutorial? Will I include a tutorial? Definitely. Especially since, as I've said, this isn't a Marble Blast game, so I'm not expecting people to be familiar with Marble Blast. Yeah, another. So yeah, there'll first of all, but yes, there'll definitely be a tutorial. I had a really cool idea for how I was going to integrate that into the story when there was a story. Sorry, but yeah, no. It'll probably just be more of a thing like you start out and says, hey, you can use these keys to move, and then you use those, and it's like, hey, you can use this to jump, etc. And there'll be some mechanism for finding like notes along the way that help you out with the different mechanics, because gameplay mechanics will be introduced throughout. And that's another thing that's different from Marble Blast. In Marble Blast, basically you learn everything you need to learn in the beginner levels. In subsequent levels, I mean, I guess there are technically a couple things like oil slicks that aren't in beginner, but anyway, in the following levels, it's just combining those mechanics in different ways, which is great if you're really creative, but sometimes it can start to get stale. Now, the developers of Marvel West were actually really, really creative. But what I'm going for with Quaternion is a different approach, wherein basically every level is either introducing something new or combining things in previous levels in a really original way. And so, when levels are getting introduced, or when mechanics are constantly getting introduced, you're constantly learning new things. That gives you a cool sense of progression and of discovery, more importantly. You're discovering something new with every level you beat. Anthony mentions games where if you struggle with a level too long, you can skip it if you choose to do so. I know another game that uses that is Chip's Challenge, which was, oh my gosh, one of my favorite games back in the day. The problem with doing this is that it feels cheap. It feels like, I mean, yeah, you do it as sort of a last resort, but if you ask me, it's just an easy way to make up for bad game design. It quickly just becomes an excuse. It becomes a way you can get away with not having the best difficulty curve, and that just, it's a cop out, is what it is. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but I mean, if you want to design a game well that has a very linear structure, and then add that feature in just in case somebody gets stuck, and that's kind of how Marvel Blast does it actually. They do have a level unlocking hidden button that you can hit if you're completely stuck. Um, you know, the problem you can run into with that is you could just have somebody who gets sick of a level and could do the work to complete it, but is just lazy. And so they fail it to the point where they're allowed to skip, or if it's something like Marvel West, they just straight up skip. And while for some people that works and that's fine, that kind of cheating, etc. Uh, in practice, that can lead to issues where, like, let's say this level, sucks, so you skip it and you move on to the next level. Well, that level was a prerequisite, so you can't just skip it and move on. You're going to be even more lost in the next level. It's sort of like why my college recommends retaking a course if you got a D. Because, yeah, technically you could move on, but you're even less likely to pass the next course up because you don't understand the things in the previous course properly yet. If Quaternion is its own game, will it have completely different items? I think there's a question that's sort of a prerequisite to that question, no pun intended, which is if Quaternion is its own game, will it have items? And that's actually a question that I'm not sure of the answer to. Whether I even want to have some sort of inventory items or power-ups or what have you, like in Marble Blast. As of yet, I am still a bit conflicted on that. On the one hand, I don't necessarily see any reason why not. On the other hand, I don't necessarily see any reason why. It would be cool to have power-ups that are location dependent, like in like something similar to the power-up arches or pillars in Spyro games, or the power-up rings in sandboxing in MBPU. That's the first power pack, if you didn't know. In fact, let me actually show you that level so that I can demonstrate concretely exactly what I mean. This is one thing I'm thinking about doing in Quaternion is freezing the game apparently. is having rings like this, where if you go through it, it gives you a power up. This would allow for a bit more in the sense of, well, it's a bit hard to play with all this lag from the stream. This would give you a bit more of a sense of, ooh, it's tricky to do this. What am I even saying? Sorry, I kind of spaced out when I said that. It adds difficulty to it in that you need to sort of plan out where you're going to go before you even get the power up. So yeah. Um, Anthony's giving me the idea of if the theme is fixing a machine, maybe have items as machine parts. And this could work. Now by machine, I don't necessarily mean a stereotypical machine. I mean, yes, there will be like something resembling gears at some point, I'm certain, but don't expect to find a wrench, is what I'm saying. But definitely, something along the lines of key cards or similar could work, just as an easy means of having unlockable parts of levels. I could very easily see myself including something like that. I'm just uncertain about whether to have sort of, power-up type items at this point. As far as the idea of having an inventory to keep more than one item, that could theoretically open up an entirely new class of puzzles. Like, you've got your inventory management. Well, how do I do this and that if, I can, only do that? Or, and, maybe what I'll do is restrict you to one item and have that actually be a puzzle mechanic. I need to unlock these doors, but I can only carry one key at a time. And, the tricky thing with that is whenever you have a situation with keys like that, especially if they're interchangeable keys like they are in most games, you always run the danger of having an unforeseen situation wherein you get stuck because you used a key in the wrong place and you have no way of getting another key. So I'll definitely need to be careful to design things to avoid that occurrence. So you can see how the power-up rings and the gem rings work. Are there any other questions? Oh, we're over an hour by now. This stream went far longer than I was anticipating. Not necessarily a bad thing. If you're going to go non-linear, it's going to be a testing nightmare anyway. Perhaps. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily be that pessimistic, but testing is definitely going to be a big deal. And I am going to, I don't necessarily want to say need, because that would kind of contradict one of the driving principles behind the game. But I'm going to definitely want people's advice on that. You're going to have to vigorously check for impossible situations. Actually, the way this level design is structured, there really aren't impossible situations. You can get stuck into a position where you only have one level that you can complete to unlock anything else, but the way that works, the way that this works with the way levels are designed to unlock other levels, that kind of impossible situation doesn't occur. The way that an impossible situation would occur is if some of these levels gave you items that you needed to unlock other levels, and if these were interchangeable. Because if that were the case, again, we're in a situation where we don't have a strict Hasa diagram. But one great thing about these diagrams is I can guarantee you, if your level design can be modeled as one of these diagrams, you have no impossible situations. You can guarantee that. So as far as the level order itself, there won't really be impossible situations. As far as things in the levels, there might. But again, another thing I guess I should mention is the way that these impossible situations come up is you have to have resources that you can gain that are interchangeable that you need to deplete in order to progress. And that depletion is another important mechanic. So even if you have interchangeable like items that you get within the levels, if you don't actually remove those items for in order to unlock something, you can't run into impossible situations. So a great example of this is Super Mario 64, in which the levels are based mainly on having the right number of stars to unlock the level. These are interchangeable resources that you get in completing the levels that are needed to unlock others, but they don't get depleted. It's just you need to have gained that many. So there's no way to get stuck because you can't like unlock the wrong thing. If you have to make a choice between two levels to unlock, well, you can, if you have enough stars for either one, you can unlock both of them because unlocking one doesn't then restrict you from the other. There's not this sort of a sort of rivalry occurring between those resources. Lastly, another thing I feel that I should mention with this is another situation in which you can guarantee that impossible situations don't occur is to have some sort of renewable way of gaining these resources. Now, this is almost similar to the whole skipping a level thing, in that it's kind of a quote unquote cop out thing to do. But there are games in which you have these resources that get depleted to unlock things, and it's possible to run yourself into a situation where you don't have enough and you don't have a way to gain enough, except you do because the game designers will throw in an additional way, maybe a slow way at that, to gain these resources back if you run out. One example of this is in the original Legend of Zelda. In later games, they didn't do this. They were just clever enough with the way they placed the keys to avoid impossible situations. But in the first Zelda game, I think it is actually possible to run into a situation where you do not have enough keys on you to complete a dungeon. Now, there are actually multiple ways you can get around this. Number one, you could literally just start working on another dungeon and get keys from it because they work between dungeons. That wasn't preserved in later games. You can also just straight up buy keys. And again, this seems like a sort of cheaty, skippy, cop-outy thing to do, so to speak. But if you literally run out of keys, you can spend plenty of time killing enemies to get rupees, to buy a key, and get yourself out of the mess. There's another example that I'm sure you'll be familiar with of this sort of mechanic, wherein you have a renewable way of gaining the resources you need to unlock new things. And can you guess what it is? I'll give you a hint. I'm playing it right now. Yes, that's right, MBPU. MBPU introduced the Marbucks system, and Marbucks are gained by getting better times and levels, and are lost by spending them on marbles and possibly on level skips. Now, the problem that you might run into for this is that you could end up in a situation where you just don't have enough Marbucks. Now, I don't know whether this happens. I think since I added new marbles, it can actually happen where you don't have enough Marbucks to buy all the marbles you want. But what I've done is made sure that every time you complete a level, regardless of whether you improved your time at all, you get 5 or 10 Marbucks profit from it. Just so if you complete a level, like if you play the game a lot and beat levels like a couple hundred times, you can build up a sizable number of Marbucks to spend. Now it's probably too little. I think I have actually received that complaint at one point, but it's something. So if you do that, and or just be clever with your placement, and or have them not be depleted, have the resources not be depleted, and or just forget about resources and stick to a straight up Hasse diagram, you can easily guarantee that there are no issues with impossible situations. Can you sell your marbles back to get Marbucks back? No, there is not a way to do that in MBPU, at least not currently, and, well, I'm not really planning to add anything more. At this point, any patches are just bug fixes. So, so yeah, once you buy a marble, it's yours perpetually. I don't actually currently have enough Marbucks to buy all the marbles. I think that's probably because my Marbucks count got screwed with in testing. And again, this is more of a cop-out thing, but there is also theoretically a way to just give yourself Marbucks. There's a function called change money. Look it up. at this point, unless somebody has further questions, I think I'm about going to leave out. Or leave out? That sounded weird. I think I'm going to leave or leave off the stream. Not leave off. What's the phrase I'm looking for? End? Just end? Yeah. So if you have any further questions, please state them now or forever hold your peace. And by forever, I mean until the next stream, or heck, just post them in the forum thread, and I'll be able to look at them and answer them there. It's just you won't get to hear my beautiful, cold, congested voice in the process. Going once. Going twice. Waiting for the stream to catch up to the point where I say this. Okay. Well, at this point, I don't. At this point, I think people basically don't have any more questions. So if you have another question, be sure to post it in the forum thread, or ask it next time I stream, or just straight up, call me on Skype if you have me on Skype. Email me. I don't know whether my email address is on the forums. Um, so yeah. Definitely get excited. Quaternion development is very much active, and I've gotten quite a bit done this week. Maybe not as much as I was hoping to maybe get done, but hey, I mean, all this physics stuff is a huge advancement. I've basically recoded all of the stuff from Simulacrum, well, most of the stuff by now, but better because it's all nicely interfaced with the scripting, and yeah, Simulacrum. A lot of the calculations were done on the physics side to minimize all the TCP communication, but here I don't really have to worry about that. So, um, at some point, maybe remind me to do this next week. I should show you guys what the interface looks like because the functions are pretty intuitive. You've just got like you can literally just go like local client connection dot player dot set velocity or what have you and set your velocity. It's that simple. So until next time, which will hopefully be next Friday, I'm Whirligig 231, and this has been another Feature Friday. Thank you, everybody who tuned in. Thank you especially to a couple of the folks who helped me out with some of the code that got done this week. That would include Matt, and that would include Hi Guy and Jeff, definitely. Thanks to Derp King because he was helpful in finding a couple of the function pointers that I needed. I don't know why I'm saying all this now. I mean, it's going to be in the credits of the game. But yeah. Um, Thank you all so much for tuning in. It's great to know that there are people who are genuinely interested in the future and the progress of this mod. So yeah, um, I'm going to leave it off there. I will see you folks next time.